Okay, so for today's lab, we are on chapter 3 and we're starting on page 53. So we're going to learn about selections today. And this is your start file, so it's called o3start.psd. And it's already a Photoshop document. And down here in the bottom left, you can see its size, 5 by 6 inches, and it's 300 ppi. So what we're going to be doing essentially is cutting things out of these images that have backgrounds, and then we're going to be placing them onto this display. So, selection tools. There are many different selection tools. First, we have the Move tool, which is sort of like a selection tool, and its shortcut is V. Then underneath that, you have the geometric selections. So this houses the rectangular marquee tool, the elliptical marquee tool, the single row marquee, and the single column marquee. So if you want to do those, select objects of those shapes, you can do that. The freehand selection tools include the lasso, the polygonal lasso, and the magnetic lasso. We'll get an idea of how these work in a minute, but basically they allow you to freehand with a little bit of magnet as well. And then the third one down is the content-based selections and edge-based selections. So we have the object selection tool, which we used in the last chapter to select the boy. And then we have the quick selection tool, which selects based on colors of pixels. And the magic wand tool also selects based on colors, but it does it a little bit differently. So we have opened up this PSD. So we're going to start by saving our document. So you're going to go File, Save As, and in your labs folder, you're going to want to call this o3working.psd and make sure it's in the Photoshop format, which is a PSD. Okay, so now we'll be using the magic wand tool. So go ahead and click and hold down on the object selection tool and get the magic wand tool. So it is most useful for selecting an area of similar colors surrounded by areas of very different colors, so high contrast. As with many of the selection tools, after you make the initial selection, you can improve it by adding to or subtracting from the selection. So you want to zoom in to see the sand dollar at the bottom of your screen, and then go to the magic wand tool. And we are going to set the tolerance to 32. That's a good value, but if you aren't happy with the color range that it samples, you can change this value to something else. So you're going to position the magic wand over the background color, which is that maroon color, and we're going to click. And so since that is a solid color, it's going to select all the pixels with that same color value. Now we want the opposite selected. So we want the inside of it selected, right? So if you want to start over with a selection, you do Control D or Command D to deselect. So that deselects your marching ants. And then let's go ahead and put the magic wand over the sand dollar this time. And we're going to click. And you can see that it doesn't get all of the pixels inside the sand dollar, and that's because it has a variation of colors. So the tolerance setting up here, 32, is not really enough, okay? So let's Control D, Command D on the Mac again, and we'll try something different. So the Quick Selection tool is also under the Magic Wand menu, so you're going to go to that one and try it out. The Quick Selection tool is probably the one I use the most. It's really easy to make a selection, and it jumps to the edges for you. So we're going to try it. You also want to select Enhance Edge in the top settings box. Okay, and when you do that, it's going to look for an edge. So we're going to click or drag within the sand dollar, and don't go over into the background at all. And then when you're happy with that selection, you'll see that it pops to all the edges, and you'll notice that there's not any marching ants in the middle section. It's actually selected all of those pixels in there. If you have any that you want to add, you can keep clicking over other areas and it will add to the selection, but we don't really need to do that here. It looks pretty good. Okay, so once we have this selection, the only way we can get rid of it is Control D or Command D, and we are going to zoom out. So let's, not in, zoom out. Okay, so we're going to now, there, fit screen. We're going to now move that selection, and so we're going to be using the Move tool to move it. And you're going to hover over it, and when you hover over that selection, you're going to see a pair of scissors next to the cursor, which indicates that it's going to cut it out of where it is and move it. Okay, so we're going to click on the sand dollar, and we're going to drag it upwards to A, and we're going to place it over that shadow that's there for A. So that looks really pretty good. And to get rid of our selection, Control D or Command D on a Mac. Okay, so that's our first one. Go ahead and save. Now to do the next one, we're going to do the coral, the piece of coral. So we're going to zoom in down there to that piece of coral. This one's pretty easy. It's already cut out of its background. So we're going to be using the Object Selection tool for this one, which is under that same menu. And this is the one we use with the boy. It worked pretty good. But we're going to click and drag a box around that coral. And it's going to select the outline of the coral. And it works really good here because we have a solid white background. Okay, so now again we're going to go switch back to the Move tool, which is V for your shortcut, and then you're going to trim it out of that little section there and move it up here using the Move tool. Okay, and when you're done, you can click this little deselect button here or Command D, Control D on Windows. So you can move selections and reposition them as you create them, but once you've moved them and you deselect, notice I can't do anything to it. It's just part of the image now, okay? We can move a selection to a new layer if we want, but we're not quite that advanced yet. So next we're gonna zoom into the shells over here with the orange background. Okay, so we're gonna get, this is an ellipse background. So we're gonna get the elliptical marquee tool and we're gonna try this one. So it's under the rectangular marquee. and it's the second one down. So there's a couple of shortcuts that you're going to want to know here. You're not going to want to release the mouse button for a while on this one. So you're going to have to hold down your mouse for a long time. And then while you're holding down your mouse, you can use the space bar, and it lets you reposition where your marquee goes. So if you keep clicking, hold the space bar down, and then you can wiggle your mouse around. The goal here is that we position this to where it selects that ellipse perfectly. So you may need to hold down the space bar a couple times and then resize your circle, and then hold down the space bar and then resize your circle, all while you're not letting go of your mouse. It's a little tricky. Okay, when you think it's perfect, you can let go of your mouse. Okay, so now we're going to go to the zoom tool, fit screen, and we'll get the move tool. And we're going to cut this out and move it up to C. Okay, while you still have the selection marching ants around it, you can use the arrow keys on the keyboard if you want to fine-tune where it goes. But once you've pressed deselect or Control D, then you can't. But when you use the arrow keys, it just moves it 1 pixel at a time. If you hold down Shift and use the arrow keys, it moves it 10 pixels at a time. So if you want to nudge things, that's how you do it. Okay, when you're done, go ahead and deselect and save your work. Control S or Command S. Okay, the next tool that we're going to be using to select, so you can get an idea of all of them, is the lasso tool. So let's zoom into our mussel shell here, and then we're going to get the magnetic lasso. Well, hang on. Let's start with the lasso so you can get an idea. So the lasso tool selects the line that you draw. So you have to be real precise about it and go along this whole edge. Okay, notice if I get bumped, then that's part of my selection, right? It's not really the best of all the tools. If you want to change in between the lasso and the polygonal lasso, you can press the Alt key and then it will change to the polygonal lasso. So let me show you an example. So you go along here and then you decide you want a straight line. You can do Alt or Option on a Mac and then let go, and it switches. Oh, we got to keep holding it. Switches to the polygonal lasso, which allows you to click straight lines in between 2 points. So, I mean, you could go around and do it this way if you wanted. However, there's a pretty wide margin of error because I'm not too good at drawing like that. So you can create straight line segments. And maybe give it a try and just practice it like the book says for a little bit, and then see what you think. But I would end up probably just using the quick selection tool here. Okay, so once you have that selected, you can just choose which tool you want to use, but I am going to have to click a few times over here to get all of this. Okay, so then you're going to go to the fit screen and use the move tool. But this one, they want us to rotate. So we are going to press Control or Command on the Mac as we drag the selected muscle to its spot. So we're going to click and drag. And then we can actually rotate. So we're going to go up to the Edit menu. We're going to go down to Transform, and we're going to rotate this selection. So that brings up the little bounding box where you can then rotate it. If you want it to be exact, you can type it in up here on the angle box. Just type in 90. And then you want to reposition it again before you let it go completely. So put it in that shadow spot, and then once you're done, you can click the check mark and Command D to deselect, or Control D on Windows. Okay, and then the magnetic lasso is what we're going to use for this one. I do like the magnetic one. It is somewhat helpful. So we're going to go to the magnetic lasso. We're going to click once and let go. And then we're just going to follow this edge with our mouse. We don't have to be exact because it's like a little magnet. And it decides where the edge is. And then it actually puts points along that edge for you as you go. So this one is actually pretty good to work with. If you want to add a point, you just click once. So if you have a sharp corner, you can just click once. And then you want to go all the way back to your starting point. You'll see a little circle pop up, and then you can click again. So once you've selected the Nautilus, you've closed the selection, and then we can double click the hand tool to zoom out, and then we're going to use the move tool to cut it out and move it up here. Okay, so you can deselect, and then you can save your PSD. Okay, and then these, the screw head over here, we're going to put on all four corners of the frame. So we're going to zoom in on the screw, and we're going to use the elliptical marquee tool. And if you want to start at the center of it, you can click and start dragging, and then press Alt on Windows or Option on the Mac, and it will drag from a center point, which is sometimes helpful. again, you're still holding down your mouse this whole time, and you have the option to use the space bar if you want to move things around a little bit. Okay, once you have it positioned over the screw, including the edges of the screw, then just let go. Okay, now you're going to move the screw to the lower right corner of the shadow box, and then we're going to duplicate it for the other 4 corners. So I just need to zoom out a little bit here. Okay, again, you're going to use the move tool. You're going to cut it out and position it over that corner. Obviously, it's too big. Once you put it there, then you're going to do Control T or Command T, which will bring up the transform box. And then you're going to scale it down until it's about 40% of its original size. So you can do it a couple different ways. You can actually hold down and click and drag the corner until you see the width and height be around 40%. If the chain is selected, it's going to scale the width and the height the same aspect ratio. Or you can just type in 40 up here and it will make it the width and height both 40%. Okay, and then you're going to just drag that over to the corner so it looks a bit more realistic. And then you can click done, but don't deselect yet because we want to duplicate this screw. So to duplicate something, any object in Photoshop, you can hold down Alt. So I'm going to get the move tool again. I'm going to hover over my object that's selected and I'm going to hold down Alt on Windows or Option on the Mac, and you'll see the white arrow show up beneath it, and that means you're duplicating it. So you're going to duplicate it once, twice, and 3 times. So you should have 4 screws, 1 on each corner. If you want them all to look slightly different, you could even rotate them so that it looks like they're not all exactly the same, right? So Command T, Control T will allow you to do that rotation if you want. Okay, and then you click the check mark when you're done and Command D or Control D to deselect. Okay, so we're done here. Now we just need to get rid of the scrap pieces down at the bottom. So we are actually just going to crop our image. So go to the crop tool and clear your settings up here. You don't have to specify any settings up there. If you don't, it allows you to just resize as needed using the bounding box. So you can do that. Just drag in the corners until you're happy with how it's going to crop. And then you can click the check mark. Okay, so go ahead and save that. And then also we're going to do a quick export as a JPEG. And then you'll send me the JPEG and the PSD.